Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Michael DAHL. I'm with the company F-Secure, and I'm going to talk a bit about the next generation of security in our version of it. However, before I get to that point, I wanted to talk a bit about what is the security threats that we see from F-Secure's point of view. Now, I just arrived to Bucharest 1.5 hours ago. And do you sometimes feel that you are just in time? So I felt I was just in time for this event here now, even though you had to wait for a couple of minutes. But I realized on the way here that I'm way too early. Because the point is, I realized that in 2 weeks from now, there is going to be an event. And that event I should definitely have been at. So I realized that in 2 weeks from now, there is going to be a great event about old disco clubs in Bucharest. So if you didn't know of this, please go there and tell me how it was, because I'm very eager to understand how this comes along. So that was at least something that caught my attention. But obviously, that's not going to be the topic of my presentation. I'm going to be talking about something very differently. But I just wanted to give you a bit of attention and asking you. So I've got this part here. So this is not about disco clubs, of course. So what is this here? Do any of you know what this is? It could look like some nasty thing from Northern Korea, but luckily it's not. This actually saves lives. So this is a pacemaker. So this is the newest generation of the pacemakers. If we look at how it's been developing since the 1960s, where the first pacemakers arrived, they were quite big, bulky things. Now we got this small device here that gets operated into your veins up here and sends obviously signals to your heart to avoid you having a heart stroke. Now, what is the next generation of this is this. So this obviously not. So this is a brain maker. So what on earth does a brain maker mean? This means that if you are suffering from Alzheimer's disease or other diseases, this is your way to the future. So what happens is that there is a device being implanted into your head, and this device works in the same way. It sends electronic signals to that part of your brain that will be responding, and you would actually improve from your Alzheimer's disease. This has already been implemented to a number of people, and there is a significant improvement. People who were really not coping very well in daily society, suddenly they get their life back because they get these devices implemented into their brain. The great thing is that you can both improve your brain, but as you see also on the latter part here, if you have lost your arm or your leg, you get an implant, and this will help you to communicate from your brain to your limb. So if you get a robotic arm, the arm is going to respond to the thought in your head because of this implant. And this obviously means that people who lost a hand or an arm, they can live an almost normal life because they have a robotic arm that will respond to their brain. Now this is fantastic, provided you are still in control of that arm or your limb, that you and your brain are in control of that. Because the problem obviously being, if someone else would take control of that, then maybe it's not so good any longer. Because if I look at it, so let me just go back here. So this neurostimulator over here, so how do I communicate with that? So as being a doctor, how do I check as a doctor that, okay, it's sending the right signals, it's working the right way? Very simple, via a Wi-Fi appliance. So in this way, with this Wi-Fi appliance, I can connect to this electrode, which again sends signals into my brain. Now, if you would look at this appliance here, this doesn't have any firewall. It works on not a normal Wi-Fi network. It's a slightly different Wi-Fi network. But if you have the capabilities, you can easily access this. There's no firewall. There's no passwords. There's no security to this device. So I don't know, how would you feel if I would be hacking you and I would be telling you, hey, go and get me a beer now. And you would run down and you would get me a beer because your brain told you, and I was the one forcing you to do so. So this is obviously one of the aspects when we keep on looking. So the Internet of Medical Things, so we've been talking a lot about big numbers of Internet of Things and devices that are already up and running online. But there are like 3.5 million people going towards 4 million people who have some kind of device implanted into them which communicates via a Wi-Fi protocol and can be controlled from remote. Now this is still in the very, very early beginning. So if we look at 3.5 million, this is quite a decent number compared to where we are currently. And obviously we know that this is just going to be exploding massively in terms of people who would be utilizing this kind of solutions and working with this. Now, this obviously means that there are criminals, there are IT criminals who realize that, hey, hang on, this is a business model. If there are this many people who are dependent from a live perspective that this communication works, that the device that they've got implanted is actually keeping them alive, then probably both these people and the doctors who are working with them would want to pay money if I would disconnect the connection to this device. And this is obviously what we saw both during the summer when we saw the big ransomware attacks. A lot of British hospitals and the health system was impacted by this. And we saw it many places across the world in the Petya outbreak. And we saw even American hospitals who actually did pay the ransom. They were paying out because they couldn't tell their customers that, hey, bad news, your granddad is out of control. He's got this thing implanted in his brain and we can't control him anymore. Someone else took control of him. That's not a real good story to tell people who have been paying a lot of money. Mind you, in US, you don't go to hospital for free. You pay a lot of money and you would maybe feel that, hey, I need to get some value for this money. I don't want my granddad to run around and be a maniac because someone took control of his brain. Now, obviously, putting it a bit on the edge, but this is really the opportunities that we would have and the security risks that is at hand. Now, there's an interesting book, now that I already recommended you to go to the Disco Club of Bucharest in the 1960s, exhibition coming up in a couple of weeks. I can also recommend you to read this book. This is obviously also a bit of a black and white book. What would happen if technology would take control and we lose control? Well, we've seen this theme, this scenario many times, but I would say this is an interesting, and it's getting more and more interesting by the day, that are we humans in control of technology? And particularly, are the humans who want to take over technology, are they capable to and able to do that? And they definitely are. Now, when we look further from this one, so the conclusion really being that we definitely live in a hackable world, as we definitely know, and the more and more security and online systems that will be available, the more we are hackable. And this means that we need to be thinking in different ways from a company perspective, but indeed also from a personal perspective as human beings. And this also means then that when you look into what can we do with the experience that we have, now we at F-Secure, which is a company that I represent, we have 30 years of experience within this field of cybersecurity. So we've been really looking into what are all the things that we learned, how can we bring that experience onwards in our usage. The good news is that the surrounding world is definitely appreciating the security level that we bring as a company. And as such, the AV.org has said that, okay, F-Secure, with 30 years of experience, the past 5 years, you have been the best in security. So what we have done with that experience is really to try and figure out how can we merge the thinking of highly expertised consultants and brains in our lab together with the algorithms and the technology that we can use when we produce our products. And this is really where we believe that we can make a difference, because we've been working with this for 30 years. We try to understand where is the security of this business moving, and indeed, where is the criminal element moving in this business. So what we've done is to try to, at any point, understand how are criminals thinking, what are the next step from them, and that's where we believe that we would need to take that next step ahead of them. When looking at the general portfolio of a security company, well, this is our portfolio, we would see that many companies are obviously very focused in the upper corner of the endpoint protection, making sure that servers, desktops, laptops are all protected as such. Now, what we have moved into during the past 3 to 4 years is definitely to look at the left side and on the bottom side, and that's what I'm going to be talking a bit about. So the left side is obviously the vulnerability management and the scanning of the surface. So in very short, understanding what are the attack vectors into a given company. And these are the areas that you, either as administrators or advisors, would need to know. You need to know what is the attack surface. And similarly, we would see on the bottom part that as much as endpoint protection provides very high protection, there are spearhead attacks that no endpoint, not F-Secure, not Bitdefender, not ESET, no one is going to be able to protect you against. Like any malware that would be designed for just that one attack, implemented into a PDF document, sent to the HR department as an application or a CV, and the moment that opens, it starts spreading within the company. But the thing is that it spreads obviously very silently. It's very different to what we've seen before, where outbreaks would be very visible. They are not these days anymore. The purpose of the criminals is not to create attention. They are to get inside the network, spread inside the network, and tap information out of this company. This is the sole purpose of many of these attacks that we see these days. When moving on then, and talking a bit about, obviously endpoint has changed significantly. Now, only a very small part of the protection layer is related to hash values and to recognizing in databases that this is a malware that we recognize. Majority of the protection comes from the behavioral analysis, understanding why is this executable changing these components in the Windows setup. It shouldn't be doing. Immediately when you start seeing that, you recognize something is wrong here. And from there, you would be able to stop much faster the attacks. So it's much more complex than what it used to be. Very importantly, I would say, is the patch management. So as endpoint being one part of the security equation, making sure patching, and this is where we see majority of the attacks are through non-patch software, whether it be on servers, on service driving various web services or endpoints. The outdated application which are not patched to the latest update are the biggest security risk. So any security responsible in a company or with an advisor must take this extremely seriously and make sure that this has a very high priority in the security thinking. How can we patch products? Now there are many reasons why a company would decide not to patch. There are financial reasons, maybe upgrading the software would cost you extra money or the hassle of upgrading, but for every compromise you do, there is a risk to it. Now, when looking a bit further then, and looking at the endpoint as such, now all these behavioral analysis, that's really what makes a difference from a traditional endpoint protection to the next generation endpoint protection. But again here, it all boils down to how fast is the vendor responding. Because in this world, it's not a matter about being good back in time 1 month ago, 2 months ago. It's a matter of being on top of the situation 1 second ago. Because that second of gap means that you may be infected with a new 0-day infection. So this is really what makes a difference. Now, this also means that we need to be able to, at any point, change and improve the algorithms that we are working with. And this is what really makes a big difference in the way that a product works, that it is upgraded all the time, that there are cycles, very often update cycles of the endpoint protection. So any of you that would reflect on what the vendor you're using, spend a moment to understand how often are the upgrades of the endpoint protection product. If that has a long circle, you would definitely know that this is a bit of a challenge, because this is the engines that needs to be protecting against the 0 hour, which doesn't have a long cycle. That gets updated all the time, new appear. Going back to our wheel here, I'm going to go a bit on the left-hand side and talk a bit about the part of the scanning and the vulnerability surface. So if we look at it, the black part here is really the endpoint protection and where we are today before we apply vulnerability scanning and management of that, and before we apply what we call response and detection services. Now, if we look at the portfolio, so talking about the vulnerability, this is the number 2 pillar here from the left. So I spoke already about patch management, but let's talk a bit about the vulnerability management and the scanning of that. Our solution is called Radar, and what it really does is it gives you a very, very good idea of what is the attack surface. Now, if you are a company, you have a number of websites, they are driven on servers, and this is typically the prime attack target for any criminals, that they want to hit those servers that are hosting web services in order to spread out malware as such. Now this obviously spreads malware, but it also creates a great problem for the companies who are hosting these services, because it all comes down to their credibility. Now also we see quite a lot of companies who do a scanning of their domain, of their servers and their services, and you know what? They realize that, hang on, this domain, we thought we took that down a while ago, or this server, what is that server actually doing? We were not even aware of that still driving services for us. So just for doing this sanity check and understanding what are the services that we're driving is also of huge importance. And finally, we need to figure out what is the standard and the level of these services. Is it updated? Is it patched as it should be? And if not, those are the remedies that we need to take. In very short, this is how it goes. So obviously you would initially discover the network. You would understand what are my IPs in the network, what are the services that I run, and then you would do the scanning. So you simply scan these services. You extract all the information from these IPs, from the servers, from the desktops as such, if you do an internal scanning. And maybe that's well worth mentioning. So you can do the external scanning, all your external services, but you can definitely also scan your internal IPs in a given network. Not only the laptop, but any intelligent device you may have. You may not even think of your copying machine. You may not think of the security system that you have in your company. All these are IPs and interactive systems that you want to be understanding. How are they working? Then you get the overview of what are the vulnerabilities, what needs to be patched. And obviously, you start making yourself a priority list. What comes first? What is the most urgent element that I need to be addressing? And finally, you would have a status report. Now, a scanning mechanism is not something you do one time and then you do it 2 years later. You should preferably have a cyclus of, say, once a month or once a quarter at least, that you would do a new scan, review what are the results compared to the findings that we had last time, and what did we decide that we would fix, and did we actually fix it? Because this process is actually where the whole security improvement lies, that you are improving these areas that you decide on. Then in addition, I would say the scanning of different domains on the web. Again, also, we have a lot of companies saying that, but hang on, we didn't even remember we had these services running still. They should be closed down. Very well. There is a good way of getting that overview and get those closed down. And that's what you will do with the discovery scanning and then the patching as we spoke about. But let me talk also about detection and response services. So in very short, what I started saying that the endpoint protection can protect you to a certain level, but really skilled IT criminal who wants to extract information or who wants to infect a company, they can almost certainly do so. And as said, F-Secure wouldn't even be able to stop them. We can stop, say, 99.9% of the attacks, but there is that 1.1% that is very difficult to stop, because these are guys who really want to get into the network. Now, how can you then do that? Because what happens is they intrude the network and they would start making their way up to an admin position so that they would be able to get access to all the entities in the network. And from there, they would kind of figure out where is the information that I want to get hold of and how can I extract that information. Whether it's user data, you can imagine an insurance company, a bank, these are very vulnerable user data that they would want to extract. And obviously for entities like that, it is extremely harmful for their reputation if a spearhead attack like that is successful. And they could go in the media and say, hey, we just breached the back end of the biggest bank in Romania. That would be a problem for that bank. So what the rapid detection and response service does, it monitors these movements in the network to understand, are someone actually in the network that shouldn't be in the network? So how does that work? Let's just get the whole network out here now. So the way it works is that we have the full network here. With the solution, we install sensors on all the devices in the network, the servers, the laptops, even we would set up honeypots that would be acting like a server, so that if any traffic comes to that server, we know that something is wrong here, because that server shouldn't have any traffic. The admin knows that this is a honeypot, but any outsider, he would not know. He would go to that server and check it out and start moving around on that server. So we get a vast amount of data into our cloud. From there, a lot of algorithm filters out this amount of data, because it's in the millions of data being sent from these sensors. And that all boils down to what are the anomalies. So where do we see something, movements that shouldn't be in the network? We get that to our POC, and the people working there, they would be analyzing this, and they would be able to call up either to the partner, to the end customer, and say, hey, someone is moving laterally in your network, you have an intruder. And with this service, we're able to do that within 30 minutes, all over the world. So this is a massive difference. Mind you, most of the attacks would last between 100 to 200 days before the customer, the company would even realize that, hey, someone is working around in my network. And by that time, all secrets of that company will be somewhere else. Now, how it works is that, as said, all the data we collect needs to be analyzed. And obviously, as you would know, any company who's been buying and either or setting up a backend to monitor this is a very tedious job. If you want 24/7 surveillance of a given network, you need 3, 4, 5 guys. Some of the guys are going to be on holiday, some of them are going to be ill. You need a big setup, very costly. And this is what we do as a service. We deliver this setup. We have a lot of people doing this, so we can monitor many customers. Now mind you also, the only thing that we do monitor are the movements. There's no data as such moving out. The sensors are only touching on what are the movements within the network. So also as such, we can clearly tell to the customers that, don't worry, no data is going to leave your network. The only thing we're monitoring are unusual movements within the network. But this is really also what is a very difficult thing to monitor and be able to extract and get some useful information out of. Now this is being then analyzed by this team here. And again, mind you, the team sitting here, they are very, very high-skilled experts who are understanding what would typically be a movement. How does an intruder work? What are the movements that he would be executing to get to the data? Then, what can be covered then? So we can deliver sensors as said for all Windows and Linux endpoints, as well as servers. And this is all rolled out silently via MSI packages. So the big difference. If you would look at a CM system, which many companies are looking into now, on the 18th of May 2018, they need to be able to document any breaches as part of the GDPR requirements. So this means that bigger companies, they would need to be able to inform to authorities, we had a breach, but not only that, they need to be able to explain what really happened. And that's why you would see a lot of companies investing into CM systems, being able to document and comply with this. Now, a CM system is quite a cumbersome thing to design and roll out. Very often, if you would go downstairs and you would ask IBM, so how much time does it take to roll out a CM system? They would say, well, typically 3 to 6 months. Now, this kind of system here, which will give you the same information, the same overview, we can roll out in 1 week. Mind you, price tag on this would be very different and very much lower than a CM system as well. CM systems typically are very expensive. This is not a cheap product, but it's far cheaper than a CM system. But mind you, this is not a product, this is a service. So really what you are saving is not the license cost, but the people monitoring and being able to report back within 30 minutes. And that has a huge value for big companies. Now, I didn't introduce myself very properly, so my origin is from Denmark. And Denmark has this small shipping company. You may have heard of it. It's called Maersk. Maersk, they have about 600 huge container ships. They own big container harbors across the world. They are the world's biggest shipping company. I'm a bit underplaying it here. They had a huge Petya downbreak this summer in July, and maybe some of you heard of this. And now a couple of months later, they revealed what was the impact of this. And the impact of this was in the size of 300 million euros for having a downtime in a week. So you can imagine bigger companies having to say, well, our result wasn't as good this quarter, we lost 300 million euros. That's not a good sign. So for companies like this, and even for many other companies, this is truly an area they need to consider, they need to understand the risk picture, and they need to make a decision about this. Just a very quick story here. We had a customer, one of our customers currently, it was a pension fund, and they obviously handle a lot of information, they handle a lot of money. And what happened was that actually the CEO had ordered from PwC, so PricewaterhouseCoopers, a targeted attack on their network. But he didn't tell anyone, he didn't tell IT either. Now, we had rolled out our solution 2 weeks prior to this, and within this time frame, as you see, 15 minutes it took from PwC did the attack till we noticed that someone is moving around which shouldn't be moving around in this pension fund's network, and we called them up and say, hey, you have a problem. Someone is moving around in your network. This was escalated to the CEO immediately, and he said, wow, this is impressive. You guys caught that I ordered an attack on my own company. And this is obviously the best case of proving the case as such. So really, just to put it here in short, this is how we see that man and machine works together in order to prevent crime, in order to protect companies, and in order to ensure the security of companies as such. This is a logo you want to remember. And just very briefly, now not only does F-Secure come from the country very up north in Finland, there's another guy who claims to be from there, or at least Finland claims that this guy has come from here. But mind you also, it's kind of an interesting thing, because Finland is, in IT business, what Switzerland used to be in banking business. Because Finland is not part of NATO, we're not part of the old Warsaw Pact either. It's a standalone company, or country as such. And also that comes through in all our structures of products, that we are neutral, we want to ensure our customers and our partners, nothing else. This guy here is the owner of F-Secure. He established F-Secure 30 years ago, and he's still the chairman. He's called Risto Silasma. Now Risto has two jobs. He does F-Secure, and in his part-time he has another job, and he runs this company here as the chairman of the board of Nokia and the 102,000 people that works in Nokia. So we are only 1,200 people in our company, so I don't know where he spends the most of the time. Anyways, in very short, just wrapping up here, we've been in the business for 30 years. We are selling our solutions and promoting them across the world, and we are very, very heavy on competences in terms of consultancy and technology. And this is what we all condense into our products in terms of endpoint security and vulnerability management, as you saw it, and the detection and response. What it all comes down to is really reliability, and that's what we believe strongly in, and we convey that, and we do that together with our partner InfoDesign. So if you want to hear more, understand more, just go straight down, don't go this way, go along the stairs, and we will be at the booth just downstairs here at InfoDesign, which is our very, very close partner. We've been working together for more than 15 years in the Romanian market. Thank you very much for listening in, and I'm sure if we may have any questions, we might have a moment to take that. So, are there any questions? You are all ready to give a question. Come along, yes. Give the man a microphone.
I'm Sebastian Kirka from Jakobsdal Experts. I would like to know a little bit more about the sensors that you are putting in the network. It is like a combination of software and hardware, or what it is, these sensors, and based on what it is. It's running an operating system, or what it?
So these are software sensors. So it's rolled out via MSI packages as any software solution as such. It is, as you saw, both built for Windows and Linux. So it's really a small component, small installer that will report these movements back to us. So that's in essence what it is. But we strongly see, because there are systems where you would only be measuring on the gateway level. If you see many of the solutions, they would say, okay, if we measure on the gateway level, we are able to see the traffic that goes in and out. But you can't differ that. You can't filter out what is the good traffic and what is bad traffic. There's no way you can do that. And typically, there are other ways of accessing also the network than just via the gateway level. So this is why we see having sensors on all devices, including servers and including these honeypots. That's the only solution that really gives you an idea of what's going on in the network.
Thank you.
I would like to share a fun fact about F-Secure, but let's take another question.
Is it a fun fact about me or the company?
No.
Now I
The
get a
whole
bit worried.
company,
So
yeah.
let's hear this guy first.
Hello. How your product address to virtual appliances, VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V?
I assume your question is related to endpoint.
Yes.
Yes. And the good news is that we cope with all these. So we cope with VMware, we cope with Hyper-V, we cope with Citrix. So the main platforms we cover with our solutions. We have the Business Suite Premium that would include all of these components. You can easily roll out also to all sort of Linux. So mind you, again, being from Finland, we love Linux. So that means also that we support all the Ubuntu and whatever Linux platforms that are out there. So you would see that our solutions are very, very broadly covering and can easily be rolled out on virtual environments, yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the fun fact about F-Secure. I visited F-Secure in Helsinki a year and a half ago, I think. And what surprised me was the fact that all the men there knew how to use nail polish. And they use nail polish actively to put on their screws on the back of the laptop in order to find out if someone opened their laptop while they were in a hotel room. And they also told me that they use a bag of chips, of potato chips, to spread on their laptop when they leave it in a hotel room. And after they spread the potato chips on the laptop, they take a picture. And if someone wants to open their laptop and steal the secrets, they won't be able to arrange the potato chips in the same way. So that was the fun fact about F-Secure. Thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
And
And
we're
very
going
important, very important last thing. So whenever you come to Helsinki, drop me a note. I'll take you to the sauna because any proper company has in their building a sauna, and I will take you to sauna. Yeah.
Thank you.